Hey guys, how are we? Welcome in here to Slaughterhouse Sports. That is our channel. Welcome in, everybody. Welcome in to our show tonight, right? So tonight we're going to talk about Geno Smith. Geno Smith, the quarterback for the Geno Smith is the quarterback for the Vegas Raiders now. How wild is that, by the way? Geno Smith plays a long time for the New York Jets. West Virginia guy who's from Miami, Florida, gets his opportunity, shines with it after Russell Wilson ends up leaving. Seattle ends up winning that trade. But even though they dominate in that trade is not even worth any playoff wins whatsoever. I think that with Geno Smith, even though they were so good with Geno Smith, I think that they might have hosted a playoff game. I don't even know if they even won the division title. So even though they got Noah Fant and they got all these first round picks, the Denver Broncos ended up making the playoffs faster than the guys, we could say that the Denver Broncos ended up making the playoffs a lot faster than even our friends, right? Than even our friends at Seattle. So that sucks for the Seattle Seahawks. So right now they're trying to rebuild this entire program. They're trying to rebuild the entire process. They're trying to that's what Seattle is trying to do. Seattle right now is trying to rebuild without Geno Smith as their quarterback. And is this a good strategy? Do I think that this is a good strategy for Seattle? I think it's a fine strategy because you don't want to be in purgatory. And Geno Smith's going to be 35 years old in October. Like, he's an aging quarterback. He is a fine quarterback, but he's not even that great. He's just okay. And meanwhile, they're trying to get Sam Darnold for, Geno Smith's probably going to make around $42 to $44 million the next couple of years. The cap is going to be, increasing, but that's still a ton of money, and there's probably going to be a drop-off in play. Now, Geno Smith is 35 or 36 years old, so if the Raiders still view Shedeur Sanders, if the Raiders still view Will Howard now with Chip Kelly, if they still view those guys as viable options, at number 6, like, the Raiders' offensive line, I think they have Colton Miller along the offensive line. I think that they have a decent unit there. I don't think it's a terrible offensive line. Like Jackson Powers Johnson, they invested in from the Oregon Ducks at offensive line. Tight end-wise, Brock Bowers is phenomenal, so Meyer is really good on the offensive side of the ball. But running back-wise, they only have Alexander Madison, Amir Abdullah, Zamir White. Like, they do need a lead running back, and that would make you think that now with Geno Smith, and they might go out and try to sign a splash at wide receiver. They might even go back into Seattle and try to even get DK Metcalf. But Ashton Genty from Boise State is really a possibility for the Vegas Raiders. However, Ohio State, too, has great running backs. So in the second round, I believe the Raiders have their pick. The Raiders could draft Travion Henderson or Quinshon Judkins. These were both guys that played with Chip Kelly at Ohio State. So the Raiders now are becoming more formidable. You have Max Crosby, you have Wilkins along that defensive line. I still believe that they need some secondary pieces, like guys in the secondary. Patrick Graham, I think's been there. I still think Patrick Graham is their defensive coordinator there. But Denver's going to be getting a little bit better. The Chargers are still elite. But for Pete Carroll, like, he's trying to go out there with Geno Smith, and they're trying to compete. And it kind of makes sense. There's not a whole lot of great options at quarterback. I believe, though, that if I'm the Vegas Raiders, what I would end up doing is taking Genty at number 6 And then I'd look to draft Quinn Ewers in the third round. I think that Seattle should also look to draft Ewers because Ewers has some talent. You stash him as a backup quarterback who has the ability to play. Tyler Shuck, if he goes in round 2, that might be too rich for the blood of the Seattle Seahawks or of the Vegas Raiders. So why did Seattle make this move? It's because Geno Smith wanted more money, and Klint Kubiak, even though he was enamored with Geno Smith, Klint Kubiak was also in San Francisco with Kyle Shanahan and spent a year with Sam Darnold. So that connection there is really, really, really strong in Seattle. And that's not a terrible move by Seattle. If you sign Sam Darnold for a 2 or 3 year contract, I'd prefer a 2-year deal up to about $65 million for Sam Darnold because I don't want that third deal. All right. And Sam Darnold, I don't think he's going to take you to the promised land. I believe he could take you to the playoffs. But if I'm looking at Geno Smith for Sam Darnold, Geno might have a little bit of a stronger arm, but Sam Darnold's just as young. These quarterbacks are very, very applicable to each other. I think Geno Smith in Minnesota, he wouldn't have had a better regular season than Sam Darnold. Now, maybe in the playoffs, he would have been clutcher and not completely melted in those last 2 games. Sam Darnold, I've never been the biggest fan of Sam Darnold, but for 15 games last year of the regular season, with that offense in Minnesota, he was an absolute rock star. If we're just looking at the regular season, Sam Darnold was a top 8 quarterback in the NFL for the year 2024. So Seattle's going to look to sign him really cheap, which is $30 million a year, the same as Baker Mayfield. They're going to look to build their defense. They clear $30 million in cap space. So Seattle should go out there and spend in free agency. And now in the draft, you know what could happen in the draft is they can finally build their team. Is Seattle in the draft can finally start to build a really, really great defense. And, if you end up getting Sam Darnold, it's not awful. And then you could go dig back into the quarterback market and go get a Quinn Ewers in the third round or even in the late second. You go up and get Quinn because Quinn is a perfect fit for the Shanahan offense. All right. So Seattle, you still have great running back talent. Zach Charbonnet, Kenneth Walker, Jackson Smith and Jigba is a massive talent. Jake Bobo is going to be a talent. There's still pieces on this roster. And what you might get for DK Metcalf, you might even get a 2026. What I would do is get a 2026 first-round pick, and you could even trade out of this pick this year to end up getting a 2026 pick. So you have to see, if you're Seattle, do you like Arch Manning? Do you like Garrett Nussmeier? Do you like Dante Moore? Do you like Nico Yamaya? Do you like Drew Aller? Do you like these quarterbacks that are coming out in 2026? Even Lenore Sellers could even be a quarterback that I think is eligible to come out. Even Sam Levitt could possibly entertain going to the draft. Carson Beck is going to be going to the draft. So it's going to be a better quarterback market in 2026, and 2027 is going to be absolutely loaded with elite level quarterbacks. So if you're Seattle, maybe at 15 there's a great player, but if there's no one at 15 that's a great player, you can go then and give away your first-round pick so that you can go out there and have the flexibility to sign a quarterback, all right? Or maybe you have to love Quinn Ewers or you have to love Sam Darnold in this process. But you could go into the season with Drew Lock as your quarterback, and Drew Lock can try to replicate Sam Darnold in Minnesota. I know that you don't have a rookie quarterback. So I don't believe Fields is going to be in Seattle. I think that Fields might even be in a New York Jet, or I believe that Fields is probably going to stay in Pittsburgh. So Seattle, what are your options at the veteran market? I don't think that Aaron Rodgers is going to want to go on a 1-year deal up to Seattle. That's not really a win-now team. Seattle's still trying to build their culture. That's a giant distraction. I could see Zach Wilson maybe landing there. That's certainly a possibility if you don't go after Darnold. But it just seems with Klint Kubiak that Darnold's going to be the guy. But I wonder why Mike Macdonald would think that Sam's going to take you to the promised land. I would still pay Sam Darnold bridge quarterback money. I don't believe that Sam, in the biggest of moments, I just think he has weak arm strength, where even a Tua Tagovailoa, the upside of Tua and the accuracy there is somewhat interesting. Somehow Jordan Love at full strength is more exciting than Sam Darnold to me. All right, so... And then you're not in Seattle, you're going to be throwing to Smith and Jigba, who is like probably a top 15, top 20 wide receiver. But even Addison might even be better than Smith and Jigba. And then the tight end Hawkinson's a really good player. And then Jefferson's like a top 3 wide receiver. He's right up there with Jamar Chase, his LSU teammate, as being the best receiver in all of football. So it will be an adjustment for sure. Kevin O'Connell is a brilliant play caller. Grant Yadinsky, McCown, and Wes Phillips. So it's a great staff over there in Minnesota for sure. So, Darnold is a fine quarterback. But Seattle now has options. And I think that they can almost go the Oklahoma City route. They got to just select really solid defensive players and really solid core players. All right. I don't love the idea of tanking, but if you have 2 draft picks in 2026, and you're able to, I think Metcalf, you should try to get a first-round pick. And then imagine actually if you trade Metcalf for a 2026 and then you trade your pick for a 2026, you will then have 3 first-round picks in 2026. That is what I would actually do. I would trade Metcalf, maybe to Kansas City, but Kansas City's going to be really good. Try to trade Metcalf to a decent team. Maybe trade Metcalf to the Patriots for their 2026 number 1 pick. Then trade your pick, the 15th overall pick. See if you can end up getting another number 1 in 2026 or get more draft capital and really load up for a quarterback in 2026. So maybe you have Zach Wilson and Drew Lock as your quarterbacks going into 2025. You get this defense rolling. You try to draft some offensive linemen. You draft some more depth at wide receiver. Okay. You continue to clear cap space so that next year then you splurge. Your defense is ready. Your offensive line is ready for your Arch Manning to come into Seattle. And then bam, the whole thing is set up. And then you have a 5-year window with that quarterback on a rookie deal where you can go compete for the Super Bowl, can go compete in the NFC because the Eagles are going to get weaker. All right. The Rams and the 49ers are going through transition periods. The Washington Redskins are going to be an all right football team. All right. With Jaden Daniels at quarterback. So, I mean, that's kind of what Seattle is doing, and I fully trust in Mike Macdonald here. I really do. Now, I mean, boy, oh boy, they tried to go out there, and they're trying now to get Sam Darnold at quarterback, like this whole Klint Kubiak thing. So offensively, Mike Macdonald really needs to pay attention offensively, and I wouldn't completely lose all leverage. Like, you shouldn't sign Darnold to a Daniel Jones like $120 million 3-year deal, because once if Darnold regresses, and then you're stuck with Darnold over the next couple of years. So, I mean, I think that the market for Sam Darnold is not actually that high. I don't know if Tennessee is interested in Darnold, but, Vegas is now no longer a landing spot for Sam. So what is the market going to be for Sam Darnold? But I don't really mind this from Seattle's perspective, and the Las Vegas Raiders are totally stuck in purgatory, and it's not completely their fault. Honestly, the Raiders should have just hired a very young coach. Like, they should have went with Kellen Moore or Liam Cohen. And they should have, honestly, they should be taking the Seattle route. Like, I would have dumped, even Max Crosby, and, I would have completely rebuilt it from the studs, because unfortunately in this division now with the Chargers, with the With the Denver Broncos getting better, it's very, very tough. Like, they're kind of right in the middle. It is the toughest job in all of sports, I think. This Vegas coaching job is just a brutal job because of the division that you're in. You know, you have Kansas City, so I get that they're still trying to compete, and I guess that they're so tied in right now to big money players that they're not going to go back and totally just, you know, go in the tank mode, right? But they are completely stuck. And boy, they didn't like Shedeur Sanders enough to Shedeur might have been available for them to go out there and draft. I think Geno's a little bit older. I don't exactly love this contract here. I don't love hiring Chip as an offensive coordinator. I don't love the ego move in the NFL. I don't like these egos are just, you have Pete Carroll, who's, you know, prideful and who's an ego. You have Chip Kelly, big time ego. You just have Tom Brady, Mark Davis. You know, you have Spytek's in kind of a rock and a hard place as a GM for the first time because he's trying to acquiesce to Pete Carroll and to Chip Kelly. It doesn't have a lot of staying power, this Geno Smith experiment. They're really, really in a rough spot. Because, again, when you sign Max and you have, you know, Wilkins and you're trying to get Tyree Wilson up to speed, I get it. Brock Bowers is great. You know, you're going to get Genty. So you're going to be a fun team. You're going to be a fun team, but I'm not completely in on this Geno Smith kind of deal. I just think the Raiders are so stuck. If it was last year's quarterback market and you could go out and get a cheaper quarterback in the draft, in a rookie draft, like if they can go out and get Michael Penix or Bo Nix at quarterback, this situation will be a lot better than this Geno Smith, you know, massive contract. And then I wouldn't have hired these older I wouldn't have hired Chip or any of these guys. This is a great coaching, you know, this is a great coaching class, and I'm just not enamored at all of what the Raiders are doing with Pete and Chip, and because this is like they're trying to make a win now team with Pete and Chip, and they need weapons. They need a wide receiver badly. They need wide receivers badly. They need running backs. They need an offensive line. You have an all-right quarterback. And the division, like I said, is so tough. If this were the NFC, if this were the AFC South, it would maybe even be more exciting. So it's tough for the Raiders. I think it's tough being a Raider fan. I think you'll see some decent football, but you're probably going to see 8-8 football, to be honest. And it's a very hard situation because with the people that you now have and the contracts and the decisions that you've made going with Pete Carroll, and I guess Tom Brady wants to compete all the time, you're just not giving yourself flexibility for the future. All right, with, you know, this big Geno Smith contract. I don't want you guys to get stuck with an older quarterback. Where Seattle now has a lot of flexibility, a lot of young talent, a great young coach. I think Seattle can make out really well, but this Sam Darnold contract, if you're going into the 40s, it could turn into Daniel Jonesville real quick, or it could be a Baker Mayfield, like, really nice little run. You know, and you could still, if you're paying Sam an affordable contract, you could still then draft the QB of the future like J.J. McCarthy. You could still do that in the 26th draft. So all of this needs to be considered, right, if you are Seattle. Like, can you still be a fun, competitive ball club, but still have great assets and flexibility into your future? All right, that's kind of what Seattle has to do, and it will be fascinating to see where Seattle goes with this, you know, quarterback here, with this Darnold situation.